Hello and welcome to the Spark Gaming Podcast. I'm here with Parsons Media Studios.
How are we doing, media geeks, on this fine Friday evening?
Indeed. At the current of this little podcast recording, it's currently the 13th of April. I have to check if the microphone is working. Yes, it is. So I apologize for the loud voice, but you gotta double check sometimes. So, because Parsons Media Studios is here, I thought we have a look at movies, obviously. And in celebration of the Marvel Infinity War coming out, we're going to discuss the Disney Marvel movies. So, any of the Sony Spider-Man movies, or the previous Hulk movie that came out in 2004 or 5, I can't remember.
2003.
Yeah, 2003. It will not be here. We're only going to look at the Disney Marvel films, starting with Iron Man that came out in 2008, and we're just going to work our way up to, where we are now. We're going to do little reviews of it, so not a full-length review, but maybe a full-length review, but it doesn't matter, because this is a podcast. So, I'm here with my Disfono, and Elliot is here with his Copperberg.
To 10 years of the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
And to another 10.
Indeed. So I suppose we should start off with Iron Man, of course.
Of course, the one that started it all. In
2008. What's really funny is that apparently, Tom Cruise was going to be the original Tony Stark,
and Leonardo DiCaprio was also considered for the role.
Imagine how different it would be now if Tom Cruise or Leonardo DiCaprio was. I could see Tom Cruise as the part, but I would never really see Leonardo DiCaprio as that, Tony Stark. Tom Cruise looks like it, and I can understand why, but Robert Downey Jr. has kind of already painted that picture.
Right now, it's hard to believe it's been 10 years since Iron Man came out, because we were 10 years old when the MCU began, and really, it's hard to believe that 10 years on, we're already 18 films in, looking ahead to the third Avengers film, and just looking up to the man really who starts it all, which is Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. I mean, the first film really was in my mind a game changer for the comic genre in cinema history, because, well, not only did it accelerate the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it started one of the greatest superheroes in, I think, comic book history, as well as superhero movie history.
True, I suppose, but in my perspective, I would say it sort of paved the way in the Disney Marvel kind of thing, because I remember it was technically the Spider-Man movies that from Sony that really kicked it off, but
and the X-Men movies.
Yeah, but Disney Marvel sort of got a strong hold in it. On movie after movie after movie, they always managed to find a big success, and I can understand why. I think it's the second most successful Marvel film, Iron Man. I remember when it came out in 2008. I heard about Marvel. I've known about its heroes because I've watched the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, so I know little about the other heroes. I knew mainly about Spider-Man, and I'm pretty sure loads of people can agree with me on this, because if you were growing up, you would have seen on Jetix the 90s Spider-Man show, which took its stories from the actual comics, and it even did a cameo of Stan Lee as a character at some point, as well as showing other Marvel superheroes like Captain America and Iron Man. So when I learned about Iron Man, I was watching an episode of 90s Spider-Man where Venom and Carnage would team up against Spider-Man, and War Machine came in to step in, and I thought, War Machine? I didn't know that was in the Spider-Man universe, but when I looked it up, I was like, oh, what is this Iron Man stuff? So when I heard there was a movie about it, I was like, I might as well see it to, gain more knowledge about it, and there you go. I thought it was a really good film.
Well, Iron Man grossed $585.2 million at the box office during its theoretical run. and it was deemed at that point a box office success thanks to performances of Robert Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow, Terrence Howard, and Jeff Bridges, and the whole cast really. He was very he was good how it dealt with themes like terrorism and
the use of like power.
Exactly.
Because I guess that's what Iron Man is all about. Because Tony Stark is sort of like this billionaire playboy. He's like, oh, I'm doing this and this. Until his whole world was changed when, Iron Man. It's not a she. He got a taste of his own weaponry, and that's how it really started from there. What's really fascinating to me is that his best friend Rhodes is it Rhodey?
James Rhodes.
Yeah, Rhodes. That's it. He was played by a different actor.
Terrence Howard.
Yeah, Terrence Howard, but unfortunately he didn't really get along with the crew during the film set of Iron Man, so hence the reason he wasn't really seen again in the second film, because
he was replaced by Don Cheadle.
Yeah, who is the more, I see him as the more, Rhodes kind of look.
Me
guy.
too.
So obviously Iron Man was a big success. What do you think of the villain? What do you think of the villain Ironmonger?
I will admit, I really liked him. I think he's definitely one of the strongest MCU villains that we've had in the last 10 years.
I don't know about that. I would say he's a strong contender. Other than that, he doesn't really have much of a backstory. He's kind of like, oh, I just want to make money. I want to have power, and it's not that kind of original villain backstory, I suppose.
Not really, no.
Because I suppose Disney was giving it sort of like a one shot to see what would happen. So I suppose they were kind of taking a risk there by not really giving Ironmonger much of a backstory. But if he did have a backstory to it, his daughter might have died, or hence the reason he's wanting to have this power or something, it would make sense. But from what I see of the movie, he's nothing more than just, what his name suggests. He's just a power monger. But I will say his armor looks really terrifying. It looks really well done, especially with the CGI. I think pretty much just to clear this all out, the CGI effects in the Marvel movies have been really fantastic. Same with the acting as well. So we don't have to talk too much about the acting, but yeah, that's really been a good thing for the Marvel movies to have such superb acting and CGI effects, even though some of the movies may have the things where it's a bit off, but it's generally just ignored by the superb afterwards. So I suppose for Iron Man, the first Iron Man, I would have to give it a 9 out of 10. 9 because, again, superb story, superb Iron Man, love it all. I just wished Ironmonger had more of a villain backstory to him, so I can understand why he wanted to do that.
Yeah, he should have definitely gone the backstory.
Yep. So what's next on the list?
So now moving on to the second installment of the MCU, which was The Incredible Hulk, as released in June 2008 and grossed $263.4 million at the box office. Now, following the mixed response to the 2003 film Hulk, Marvel Studios immediately reacquired the rights to the character, and in 2008, Edward Norton took on the role of Bruce Banner, and the film received positive reviews from the critics alike. And Norton was set to reprise the role in the Avengers and any other future installments.
Yeah.
But however, he was replaced by Mark Ruffalo.
It was apparent again. It was the same thing with Rhodes. Edward Norton didn't really feel like he was. It's a bit different, I would say. Even though they both left the Marvel Studios on their first film, Edward Norton left because of creative differences. He felt like he didn't feel like he was putting enough creative element in the Bruce Banner character. If I had to be honest, I prefer Edward Norton's Hulk to the Mark Hamill Hulk because
Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah, Mark Ruffalo's Hulk, because it was more gritty. It was more detailed Hulk, if you get my meaning. And I would say it's one of my favourite films because the Hulk is an interesting kind of hero. Well, it depends really, because you can't really call him exactly a hero.
No, you can't.
Because he's he kind of smashes up everything in his way. So he's more like an anti-hero in some way.
Yeah, I'd say he's more of an anti-hero.
Is again, it's just a like Dr. Jekyll what do you call it? Hyde, Mr. Jekyll and Hyde. So, you can't really exactly say he's a hero. But I will say that, like, again, it's hero side of the thing. Villain side of the thing. Again, it falls flat on its villain side of the thing, because although we are treating a bit more to the villain, how, he thinks he's the best, but then he gets absolutely smacked by the Hulk in that scene in the college where, like, when he comes to the Hulk, says, "What are you going to do?" And he just kicks him in front of the tree.
Yeah.
I find that very hilarious. It's unfortunate because...
He was a weak villain in my mind.
Yeah. But at least we got the beautiful Abomination versus the Hulk fight, which is one of my favourite fight scenes in the Marvel Universe. And it creates the iconic moment of using police, boxer gloves for the Hulk.
I think, in my opinion, The Incredible Hulk, whilst I thought it was a good film, I think it was more one of the weaker installments of the MCU, because whilst I did enjoy it, I don't know, I just particularly I wasn't as overly as keen on it as well what I hoped it would be.
I suppose because again, like, Hulk it's kind of a difficult hero, but it's kind of like, do you like destruction? There you go, there's destruction for you. But I really don't mind, because I like hero concepts where you can't really exactly call them a hero. It depends on your, what you define as a hero. So I define Hulk as like an anti-hero. But I will say it does have it's interesting to see they don't go for like the typical, as soon as him being normal, then it being exposed to the radiation, because that's what the 2003 movie did. But in this version, when did it come out again?
2008.
Yeah, in the 2008 movie, they already skipped that part and went for a scene where it's like, okay, so he already knows he's the Hulk, everything has just happened and everything. Here's him trying to lead a normal life, and then things just go pickety ponky.
Well, what was also one of the most interesting parts of that film is in the post-credits scene when Tony Stark made an appearance in that.
I was actually pretty shocked to see Iron Man there, and I actually didn't really have a clue about what he said by building a team together, because we should also say that in the post-credits of Iron Man as well, again, Nick Fury, when he first appeared, I was like, who is he? What team? So then again, it was like team thing.
It was kind of foreshadowing the Avengers in that post-credits scene.
Yeah.
When Tony Stark said to Ross, essentially, what if I was to tell you that they're putting together a team? So essentially, that was giving the audience more hints and teasers towards the Avengers, essentially.
Yeah. And I have to give credit to like the Hulk ending where like he that part where it said days of like, without an incident, and then it comes from like this number all the way to 0 as he opens with the green eyes as he smiles. I love that scene. It's kind of just like, yeah, you already know what's happening. So in conclusion, I would rate the Hulk about an 8 out of 10, because
I'd say it's fair enough.
Even though it's one of my favourite movies and I love it, I would say it has a bit of wasted opportunities, because
it did, yeah.
Again, the villain just falls flat, doesn't really have any character development. Actually, no, sorry, I would give it the same score as Iron Man. It has everything it's going for, but it keeps, not developing a good villain arc for the main villain. So again, it just falls on that 9 out of 10 spectrum for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd personally give it 8.5 out of 10 in my opinion. For I think the same reasons as you, because again, like Iron Man, there was a wasted opportunity for the villain. Didn't quite develop into the full potential that he could have been. So, anyway, moving on to the third installment of the MCU, Iron Man 2, which was the sequel to Iron Man. So in Iron Man 2, it picks up 6 months after the events of the first film, and in those 6 months, Tony Stark has been resisting calls by the United States government to hand over the Iron Man technology, whilst also dealing with his declining health from the art reactor in his chest. But when a Russian scientist called Ivan Yanko develops the same technology as Stark and builds weapons of his own in order to pursue a vendetta against Stark family. In the process, he joins forces with Stark's business rival Justin Hammer to try and take him down. Now, note about this film. This is the first film to feature Don Cheadle as James Rhodes, aka War Machine, following the departure of Terrence Howard, who, as I said earlier, left because of creative difficulties. But this is also the first film to feature Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, who makes her first appearance as the character ahead of the Avengers, and also features Nick Fury and Phil Coulson in larger roles as opposed to the first film. And it grossed at the box office $623.9 million at the box office worldwide. So it was better. So it grossed more than the first Iron Man, and it again received generally positive reviews from the critics alike. And yeah. So Tom, what are your thoughts on Iron Man 2?
Iron Man 2, I would say it has a good sequel. It's one of those movies where like it actually does good. Whenever we hear that movies get a sequel, where we get a bit worried because it might not live up to the first film. But I think with Iron Man, I think that's the good thing about Marvel's Disney. They're able to consistently make good follow-ups to their movies. So with Iron Man 2, I was dead anxious to see it. Like, I begged my parents to see it, and we eventually got there. I remember liking War Machine, and I remember having is that I actually played the video game first, then I saw the movie. But luckily, the video game doesn't really focus on the movie. It kind of goes on its own. I thought it was really good. Again, interesting villain in some way. At least the villain was a bit more interesting, but again, it just does not feel that kind of, so why do you hate that particular person?
No backstory, really.
Yeah, Justin Hammer, he may have had a backstory in the comics, but again, the Disney Marvel don't really take full advantage of that. They kind of just say, he's this business rival to Tony Stark.
We didn't really see why he wanted to outshine Tony Stark.
Yeah, it's just business rivalry, nothing else. With Whiplash was his name?
Whiplash, yeah.
Yeah, with him, he had sort of a backstory there. Like, he was there, like he had a reason to, so that's good. But I feel like he had a bit of a wasted potential because he doesn't really have that much involvement in the film. And in fact, the actor who played Whiplash had the exact same problem. He felt like, again, he couldn't put much creativity in the film. And I think it's a bit of a trend in the Marvel movies, because even though it grosses like loads of millions of money at the box office, some of the actors say that they just didn't enjoy their time, or like they couldn't put much creativity in their character. So with Whiplash, it was the exact same thing, and it's the same with Edward Norton. Wait, is it Edward Norton?
Who played the Hulk?
Yeah.
Yeah, Edward Norton.
Yeah, again, he couldn't put much creative difference in his character. So with Whiplash, he was an interesting villain. He had a reason to hate Tony Stark, but he wasn't shown as much.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, had they had time to like tell some of his backstory, I think that would definitely made his villain more stronger than how it turned out.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, I think. And the same for Justin Hammer, really. Having them two had potential, but if we at least got the backstory as to how they became the people they were, I think Iron Man 2 could have definitely shown their full potential as villains, essentially.
What I will say though is that it gave me again another brilliant fight scene with Tony and Rhodes against like millions of other Iron Man, clones.
The drones from
where they
Hammer's,
fully used the
X-Ray.
power of their armors. That was really brilliant, in my opinion.
Literally, the visual effects in that scene, they were brilliantly done.
Yeah.
Just that scene, I think, was for me the standout moment of Iron Man 2.
I just like the minigun turns on his shoulder as it like swings around to shoot. I'm just like, you've won my heart. So in conclusion, again, just 9.9 out of 10 for me. Again, just great characters, great story,
Amazing film.
but focus on the villain. That's all I can say. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree. True, having definitely a worthy successor to the first film, and yeah, I think Marvel just needs to concentrate on their villains' backstories in the future in order to make them look more intimidating and more interesting to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, that's Iron Man 2 done. So, moving on to the fourth film of the MCU. So in May 2011, making his debut onto the big screen.
Wait, 2008 and then 2011?
No, 2008, 2010 was Iron Man 2.
Oh, right, yeah.
So, moving on to 2011.
It's so hard now that I think about it, like 2008 to 2010, because normally I'm now used to like each new year there was a new Marvel film, so it feels odd to have that gap.
Yeah, as I was saying, in May 2011, making his big screen debut was Thor.
Thor.
Of course, played by the amazingly talented Chris Hemsworth. Also featured one of the greatest British actors, Tom Hiddleston, as his brother Loki, and Natalie Portman, Idris Elba, and Anthony Hopkins in the cast. And the film grossed $449.3 million at the box office, and in the film, the basic plot of Thor is he's the Prince of Asgard, and he's banished to Earth and stripped of his powers after he reunites the Dominant War. So as his brother Loki plots to take the throne for himself, Thor has proven himself worthy and reclaim his hammer. How do you pronounce it?
Mjolnir.
Mjolnir. See, I just can't pronounce this. It's so hard to say.
Because
Mjolnir.
They took it from Norse mythology.
Norse mythology.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah. So I will go first this time. We're stating my opinions about Thor.
Sure.
So now Thor. This was a very interesting film in my opinion, because when I first watched it, I wasn't sure at first how film version of Thor was going to work, but when I walked in and I watched it, I actually thought I was actually surprised, because it was a pretty good film in my opinion. It definitely exceeded some expectations. I mean, the things I loved the most were the visuals and the acting from Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston was just incredible, because I love the kind of relationship between Thor and Loki, because Loki's like the god of mischief, whereas Thor's the older overprotective brother trying to keep him in place, and that was definitely one aspect of the film that I liked. But the villain was obviously Loki, and I personally can't fault Loki, because I think he was a brilliant choice for the villain, and I think including Phil Coulson in the film again definitely helps seed more hints and teasers for the Avengers, as well as including the first appearance of Hawkeye, even if it was just a cameo appearance. But yeah, not a bad star for the God of Thunder. So Tom, what's your opinion on Thor?
Mine is completely different. I don't really class it as a bad movie. I think it's a good movie, but I've only seen it once, because
so have I, actually.
Unfortunately, it's not one of those films that makes me want to come back to. Because I don't know, like Thor was interesting, the character was good, but over everything else, there's nothing really that keeps me interested in wanting to keep watching it or wanting to come back to it, because I've seen it like such a long time ago, and to this day I've only seen it once, but I barely remember it because it was just not that interesting to me. But I will give it credit, because Loki does actually have a reason for, wanting to be better, because it was pure jealousy, that Thor is this, better brother, whilst Loki is, seen as this weak and elder, kind of weaker brother to Thor. So he wants, to prove that he could be better. So that actually gives a reason to why, he wants to, take over, Asgard and everything. The jokes are funny. I do like the part where, he says, "Are you messing with the God of Thunder?" and he gets tased by the hospital staff. Just goes, "Ugh."
Oh, and the drink scene where he says, "Right, more please."
Yeah.
Oh my god, that was one of the best jokes in my mind.
One of the what was it? Again, the outfit looks great. I do like Thor's outfit a lot, but I would give this movie about a 7.5 out of 10, because even though it has great acting, a great CGI, and a good villain backstory, it's not interesting enough to keep me watching. Because even though Thor sounds like a great idea for a Marvel hero and everything, I'm just not that interested in him to make me keep watching it. Because if I look at the first Iron Man film, the reason why I wanted to keep watching it is because it was not a superhero gotten super strength or anything. It was just a normal man with technology, and it showed, him changing through the world because of what he did. With the Hulk, it was him struggling with becoming the Hulk, that he's this monster that everyone sees, and he's struggling to find a cure to his, illness or, his power.
Whereas Thor, he didn't really kind of, it didn't really kind of explain really why he's the superhero, why he is Thor.
Well, he is Thor because, he's a Norse god and he's the god of thunder, so it's kind of already there.
It's kind of already there.
But you could say, well, isn't that similar to the Hulk? Yes, exactly. It is, but I would say there's a difference. With the Hulk, he's struggling to keep it, this power, and he wants to get rid of it, whilst Thor is loving that he's the god of thunder. He's egotistical, hence the reason he's sent to Earth and blah blah blah. So, and again with Iron Man 2, the reason why I wanted to keep watching it is because Tony was going through a crisis with this heart, and that the world knew he was Iron Man and they wanted technology from him. So yeah, again, just 7.5. Great story, great everything, great villain. Could have done more.
Yeah. Okay.
So, next on the list.
Okay, so moving on to the fifth installment of the MCU. So released in July 2011. Next up on the line, now this is the penultimate film before the Avengers. We're introduced to our final key component of the Avengers, and that was Captain America: The First Avenger. Now set in the 1940s during World War II. So this takes place about 60 years prior to the events of Iron Man. He tells the story of Steve Rogers, a sickly man from Brooklyn, who when he enlists to join the army in the war against the Germans, he takes part in this experiment and gets a super serum put into his body. Therefore transforming him into a super soldier, and therefore becoming Captain America, who leads the American army into fighting the Red Skull and the Nazi force, who intend to use an artifact called the Tesseract as an energy source of world domination. But this is the interesting thing: the Tesseract is an Infinity Stone. Now, so this was the first Infinity Stone we saw in the MCU. Therefore, it was beginning to hint at Infinity War later down the line. Now, in the cast, obviously, it stars Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, who of course played Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, in the 2005 Fantastic Four film. It also features Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes, who later goes on to become the Winter Soldier. Former Men in Black star Tommy Lee Jones, Hugo Weaving as the Red Skull, Dominic Cooper as Howard Stark, who is the father of Tony Stark, and British actress Hayley Atwell's featured as well, probably one of the most beautiful and most popular Marvel women, Peggy Carter. So now Captain America: The First Avenger. Now going into this film, I was a bit skeptical about it being a superhero film set in the Second World War at first, but after watching it, I was actually surprised because it did a really good job on portraying how Steve Rogers wanted to join the army, even though he was skinny and sickly. But then really after the experiment turned him into Captain America, that gave him a true purpose to serve his country, to fight the Red Skull alongside his team who would help him. And well, I think it was definitely a very good introduction to Steve Rogers, and of course the ending scene, of course, essentially set up the Avengers. Essentially,
it put like a confirmed seal saying we are making the event. Well, I guess you can just say technically Iron Man 1 sort of already said we're going to create the Avengers kind of thing, but again it was just a big step up.
And the film grossed $370.6 million at the box office, which is considerably lower than the films that come before that. But yeah, just I think it was generally a good film. Because I'm a fan of war films. I like some of the history used in the film to explain Hitler and the other major historical figures of that time.
Yeah.
So what was your opinion on the First Avenger, Tom?
So my interest with Captain America is actually rather interesting, because I didn't see the first Captain America film because I wasn't really particularly interested in that idea. Captain America sounds stupid, so I didn't watch it. I saw Captain America in the Avengers film, and then I saw The Winter Soldier. So then I was like, oh, okay, that's good from there. I only saw the Captain America film when I was in secondary school, and it was on those we'll do whatever you want day or whatever. So that was in 2011 or something. So that's when I saw it, and I watched it again when I came back home to fill in the blanks, because we only saw about the halfway point of it. So then I carried up. So then when I went home, I watched the rest of it on catch up TV or whatever. So it's a bit of a mix for me, because I like World War II films. They're always interesting to see how they portray history and how they portray the characters and everything. With Captain America, it was a bit of a mix for me. I wouldn't say it's on the level of Thor saying it's forgettable. I would say it's a bit rememberable, but for most of the time, most of the time it's rememberable, but sometimes there are parts where I'm just I don't really care, or just typical, tropes or whatever. So with Steve Rogers, I would have to say the CGI on Steve Rogers looks a bit poor. I could tell that that's not Steve Rogers. I don't know, his head seemed completely disproportionate from the body, so you could easily tell that that's not what he actually looks like. And it was a bit odd to me that I can understand a weak soldier applying for the army, because that actually happened. 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds did apply for the army in World War II to fight for their country. So with Steve Rogers applying because he's a weakling, that makes sense. What I really don't get is that there are two parts which I really don't get. The first part is that he's just, he is conveniently chosen to be part of the super soldier experiment, even though, there are millions of others, excuse me, soldiers that have probably a stronger background than Steve Rogers that could easily apply for it, the program. But they went with Steve Rogers for some reason. And also the part where it's like he's becoming this Captain America class act. I get it's supposed to be a nod to the original Captain America because that's what he originally looks like. But if you think about it, this is a super soldier program. That we're doing this and this and this. So why make that super soldier program do these little performances and such at the beginning? I thought it'd be more logical for them to, actually go to battle instead of doing these fancy party things.
Well, one interesting part about the character Captain America is, I think one major point the film made is that he didn't change who he once was. He just because he went from Steve Rogers to the super soldier, he stayed who he was inside because that's what was important to him, more in strength and everything else. He stayed true to his beliefs. Just because he changed into Captain America, he didn't stop believing in his beliefs because he believed that the Red Skull could be taken down, and more importantly, he supposedly sacrificed himself to save the world from him.
Yeah, that's another thing I'd like to bring up. The villain Red Skull. Unfortunately, for me, he is probably on my list of the worst villains in movies. Because he's not interesting at any bit. So this is what I mean by classical tropes. He's basically just, I'm a Nazi who believes in a higher power. Nothing else. That's it.
To be honest, I wasn't too keen on the Red Skull myself.
No, even though he's a classic, Captain America villain, he's not that interesting one bit. Because you kind of look at him and say, okay, he's a Nazi, he wants to do this. How am I supposed to care?
He was very, well, again, underdeveloped in my mind.
And what's really funny as well is that they had another problem. The actor for the Red Skull, again, he didn't really have, he left the studio after playing the Red Skull. He didn't really enjoy his time there because, again, Marvel didn't really give him the chance to fully express, the Red Skull character. So, well, I highly doubt we're going to see another, Red Skull kind of villain,
No way.
Coming back. Bucky Barnes' death. It was sad to me because it actually meant something, that he this friend who's always sticked up for him. So it was sad to see him go.
Yeah.
And I thought that that was a really powerful moment in Captain America, the First Avenger, because again that it was the same thing in the comics, and what's really funny is that in the comics Bucky Barnes was like the Robin of the MCU.
Yeah.
So it was a very impactful death that made me sad for Captain America. So that's a good thing that the movie has done. So in conclusion, I would give Captain America about an 8 out of 10. Again, it's just that wasted villain potential, but it was at a greater scale because it was just a typical stereotype and just poor development on the villain. So that didn't really make me care that much. But I would say that the ending part where, they uncover Captain America, I can imagine, how distressed he is that, he's in another time now. Most of the people he's known now are probably dead.
And it must have been distressing for him knowing that he went from 1945 to 2011 and, oh my god, I couldn't imagine being in a state, being frightened, not knowing what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So, So yeah, that's wrapped up with Captain America: The First Avenger. So we're on to, of course, the first major event of the MCU.
The Avengers.
Yep.
Probably one of the most grossing films in
Film history.
In 2010.
2012.
Oh, 2012.
So
Sorry. It was a massive hit. Everybody went to see it. It basically showed the world that, Marvel, superheroes can make, this kind of film where you don't have to rely on one superhero. You can make an entire film about all these superheroes in one movie.
Having the important thing about the Avengers was it proved to people that a shared universe can work, and what I felt it did so well was bringing together all six main core members together when the world most needed them.
I would say it's 4 core members like Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, and Thor. Because when it comes to Black Widow and Hawkeye,
but like sidekicks.
Yeah, they're kind of just like there. Even though they are a core member of the Avengers, they weren't really given their proper movie kind of thing. So they're kind of just there. But they did have shared development within this movie. So that's good.
So the Avengers grossed over $1.5 billion at the box office in 2012 amongst it during its theoretical run, and it also became the highest grossing film of 2012, just beating Skyfall to it.
Mm-hmm.
But wow, what was the Avengers? So interestingly, the Avengers was the first Marvel film I ever watched. Basically, that film was the reason why I became a fan of the MCU, because essentially I was 14 when it came out, and I remember Christmas 2012. My brother got me it on DVD for Christmas, and after watching Doctor Who, which was the main highlight on Christmas Day, me, Mum, Dad, and Harry all sat down needing to watch it, and oh my, it just blew me away instantly. Just honestly, I've never seen such a fantastic film that really shows that the world can rely on a team of superheroes when you most need them. Because like Nick Fury said, there was an idea to bring together a group of remarkable people, so that when they needed us, we could fight the battles, though they never could.
Mm-hmm. So it's the same here. And I saw it in cinemas. Then later, I heavily requested to have the DVD. I still have the DVD to this day.
Me too.
And if I ever feel like watching a Marvel movie, a classic Marvel movie, I always stick on the Avengers because it's so fascinating to me. It's such a good movie to see. The Iron Man, the Hulk, and everything. Team up together to fight Loki.
It's so fun as well.
Yeah.
It's fun, engaging, and just entertaining for the whole family. And
what's really funny is that even though Hawkeye, people don't care that much about Hawkeye, they made him an important, kind of character to the Marvel universe.
That's what I liked in the film. The fact that Hawkeye had a larger role, and the fact that he was Loki's puppet most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
At least that gave him something to do during the film.
Yeah, and also it showed the people why he should be taken seriously. Managed to bring down an entire aircraft, and his skills in archery and everything. Proving that he is not a force to be reckoned with. He can easily beat you in a bar fight or any kind of thing, I suppose. So there's loads of things we could say about the Avengers movie, because it's done such a great job in characters, plot, villain, everything.
I think in my mind I give it a solid 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. And again, we were given our little hint about Thanos in the post-credit scene.
Oh yes, of course. Seeing Thanos make his first appearance in the post-credit scene, you could tell that the greater threat was coming later on.
And I had to say we would drink to that. So get your Goldberg and a cheers to this.
To 10 years of the MCU. So that's Avengers. That's in a nutshell. And that's the end of Phase 1. So now we're moving into Phase 2 of the MCU.
Right. So now, when we enter Phase 2, I like to say this now. At this point, I think I've seen. I don't know, because at this point, I've become more grown up. So I've seen these Marvel films, but some of these films I have not seen. I like to point that out right now. So Elliot has more of a experience because he's seen these films. I may have not. So I'll just let you know from this point on if I've seen them or not. But I can confirm for most of Phase 2 I've seen. For Phase 3, not so much. But carry on, Elliot.
Okay, so kicking off Phase 2 with the 7th installment of the MCU was, of course, Iron Man 3. The third and final installment of the Iron Man trilogy. So Iron Man 3 was again massively successful at the box office, grossing over $1.2 billion at the box office, becoming the second MCU film to gross over $1 billion. So in Iron Man 3, it picks up 6 months after the events of the Avengers, and Tony Stark has been trying to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder caused by the events of the Avengers, whilst investigating a string of terrorist attacks led by a mysterious new villain called the Mandarin, and he also comes into conflict with an old enemy, Aldrich Killman. Now, Iron Man 3. Now, it's always the third film in the trilogy that doesn't seem to do well, where it runs out of steam. So, well, what was interesting about Iron Man 3 was I liked how it dealt with the concept of Tony Stark dealing with the aftermath of the Avengers, especially with his
PTSD.
PTSD. Thank you. Yes. Couldn't my mouth. And then, well, the interesting thing I like most about Iron Man 3 is the fact that, and this is the same with Captain America: Civil War for Ragnarok, which we'll get to later. In Iron Man 3, it essentially deconstructed Tony Stark, his character. Like, for example, the Mandarin blowing up his mansion and destroying his suits, and essentially, and then getting his arc reactor removed. Essentially, I felt this was like deconstructing Tony Stark, and really bringing his story to a close, and setting him on to new adventures for like greater purposes. I found, and as for the Mandarin, the villain, whilst he did have kind of a backstory because we saw him in the flashback scene to 1999 when he was with Tony Stark.
Yeah. So
we kind of saw how he became the person he was and why he hated Tony Stark. So I say for that reason, I thought the Mandarin was a good villain because he had a backstory and he actually for once had a purpose. So I think in my opinion, I think Iron Man 3 was actually a very satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. And I think definitely one that set up his future appearances in the later films. Now, Tom, have you seen Iron Man 3?
I have seen Iron Man 3.
And what were your thoughts on the film?
Well, it's interesting to me because I heard that Iron Man 3 was going to be like the closing book for Tony Stark. So
it was essentially
wrapping up his story, and I will say this now: it does a great job, in how to close up Tony's story and everything. So it's a bit odd to me to see him in Spider-Man: Homecoming and
Civil War and Age of Ultron
and everything, because there was still more to him. And trust me, I'll get to Spider-Man: Homecoming soon. But back to Iron Man 3. It's a great story, in my opinion. It's good and what do you do with a hero that's that weak and something? But here's the main trouble with it. It comes after the Avengers, so Iron Man is technically still with S.H.I.E.L.D. So S.H.I.E.L.D. must have known that something bad has happened to him with the terrorist attacks. So why didn't they send Thor, Captain America, Black Widow, or any other hero that could have helped him? I don't know. They didn't do that. Like, for some strange reason, they just completely forgot that, oh yeah, we've got the Hulk and everything. Oh yeah, he's part of S.H.I.E.L.D. I don't understand why they completely forgot about that. Because, if you think about it, if Iron Man was attacked and everything, and then he's sent off somewhere, then they'll get the Hawk or someone from S.H.I.E.L.D. to find Iron Man, get him back to his feet, and then, help him out. Instead of just staying there, instead of saying, oh no, we'll let him deal with it. It's kind of just like, what are you doing then? So, with the Mandarin, he was an interesting villain to me. But his reason for becoming a villain is a bit weak, in my opinion. Like, I can see why he might hate Iron Man. It's just rather weak, in my opinion, because it was kind of just like, oh, just business, disruption. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't work with this kind, blah, blah, blah. But then you're like, well, you move on from that. You don't decide, oh, I might as well bomb him. It's kind of just like, well, that just shows you're a bit of a psychopath. And, people would say, oh, every villain does that. And I'm like, yeah, but again, it's not good enough for me. If you just pass it off to say, oh, he's just a psychopath, it's kind of just like, well, that's called poor writing to me. You can't just, say this villain is a psychopath, that's why he has to do this. There has to be a proper reason, to why he's doing this stuff. Like, let's take Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th. The reason why he killed everybody was because he was particularly ugly and they didn't like him, so they killed him. Like, they purposely threw him in the water to drown him. So he resembles this hatred for, everyone that, has, done this, terrible injustice to him. Hence the reason he doesn't show any empathy. With Freddy Krueger, he's a paedophile. And, it's a shame. But people have set him on fire, and then he becomes more mad when he realizes that, he can continue his filthy acts. So, these psychopaths have a reason. So, when it comes to Iron Man 3 and the villain Mandarin, it's a bit weak to me. Because, like I said, killing Tony Stark just because of a simple business disagreement is really, really stupid to me.
Unnecessary.
And unnecessary, exactly. But I will say that it, again, it does fantastic work with, showing all the Iron Man armors he's created and, putting a story to a close.
Okay.
So, for me, I would rate this movie about a 8 out... No, an 8 out of 10.
I think that's a reasonable rating for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so that brings a close to Iron Man 3. So, on to the 8th installment of the MCU. So, in November 2013, Thor, the Godfather himself, returned for his second solo outing in Thor: The Dark World. Now, Thor: The Dark World is often considered one of the weaker films of the MCU.
I actually agree with that. It is.
Me too.
It is a bit of the weak, Marvel films. Even though it stars like Christopher Eccleston as one of the villains, the Ninth Doctor, which I loved Christopher Eccleston. I loved his role in 28 Days Later as the General. I loved his role in in Doctor Who. Obviously, I liked his role in G.I. Joe. So him as the elf. Malekith. It's not that great, unfortunately. It was a bit of a letdown. But carry on. Sorry.
Sure. So in Thor: The Dark World, it picks up a year after the events of the Avengers, and Loki's been locked up for obviously causing the battle in New York, whilst Thor continues to defend Asgard and is reunited with his lover Jane Foster, but however Malekith, who is played by as Tom said, former Doctor Who star Christopher Eccleston, he he threatens to take a he threatens to tear apart the nine realms, and intends to plunge them into darkness. So really, I do agree. Whilst Thor: The Dark World was definitely one of the weaker films of the MCU, he wasn't that bad, I will admit. It's not like forgettable or anything. It did have some good humour, and it was, and the acting was good. But like Tom said, Malekith was just a weak villain in my mind. There wasn't he just wasn't scary or intimidating or had no purpose or anything. So, and the story, in my opinion, was a bit weak. So, really, I give Thor: The Dark World about 7 out of 10, if that's fair.
For me, it's like you said, Malekith was just not a great villain to me. It was kind of like the stereotypical, like, I'm evil elf, I do this because I'm evil elf. And the plot was rather confusing to me.
You're right.
And I originally didn't really want to see this movie because after seeing Thor and being not that impressed by it, seeing him again, I had my doubts. So again, my doubts were confirmed because the Thor: The Dark World was rather weak in my opinion, because Jane Foster, even though she was good in the first film, seeing her again, it was just not, I don't know, I felt little empathy for saying like, oh, they're back together. Okay.
She was very annoying in my opinion.
And and all this thing about like, oh, she can't do this, she's not from this land. I'm like, oh boy, I haven't seen that kind of concept before. So weak, just confusing plot, poor potential, but at least the acting is still there. So I would say I would give it a 6.5 out of 10.
Fair enough.
Because I've only seen it once and it's pretty forgettable, unfortunately. So what's next on the list?
So, moving on to the 9th installment of the MCU. So, released in March 2014, Captain America himself returned for his second solo outing in what I think is possibly one of the best Marvel films ever made, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Now, oh my god, so I remember going to see this film with my two mates, Josh and Jareth, when it first came out, and well, might I say, after watching it, I was blown away because literally Anthony and Joe Russo were just the perfect choice to direct the film. And well, so in The Winter Soldier, it picks up 2 years after the events of the Battle of New York, and Captain America has been working for S.H.I.E.L.D. in Washington during that time. But however, when him and Black Widow uncover a conspiracy within S.H.I.E.L.D., they join forces with a new ally, Sam Wilson, aka the Falcon, who is brilliantly played by Anthony Mackie. They encounter the mysterious assassin known as the Winter Soldier, who we find out is of course Bucky Barnes, who was thought to be deceased back in the first Avenger. Now, what I really liked about this film was I liked how it combined multiple genres into one film. So it was definitely like a conspiracy action thriller in my mind, whereas the previous films had been like, I don't know, sci-fi or fantasy.
Yeah.
This felt really different. It felt like a gritty action thriller with a conspiracy theme mixed into the mix. He was just definitely one of Marvel's finest films to have been released, and the way they reintroduced Bucky as the Winter Soldier, they gave a perfect explanation as to why he became the Winter Soldier, how he was rescued by Hydra and Dr. Zola, and well, Robert Redford was as brilliant as Alexander Pierce as always, and And I think another thing that made this film one of the strongest films of the MCU was the fact that it was a massive game changer. The fact that Shield got destroyed, it really changed things up slightly, and we're left at the end of the film not knowing what the future had in store for Shield. So, in my opinion, I would give this film a solid 10 out of 10 because, like I said, brilliant acting, brilliant storyline, strong villain, and overall definitely one of the strongest installments of the MCU by far. Your opinion, Tom?
So, like I said in the Captain America First Avenger film, it was the Winter Soldier that I first saw Captain America, and it was because of that movie that made me want to see the first one, because it was definitely Captain America's strongest performance. They actually showed, why, Captain America should be taken seriously. And I think they do a really good job in showing that. And the Winter Soldier is a very interesting character to me, because of his conflicting ideals and, his conflicting, agent persona kind of thing, because he was brainwashed into thinking, oh, he's this Russian, assassin, when really he's Bucky Barnes. And it's interesting to me because that's the main, antagonist of the whole thing. It was this, conflicting battle between Steve's best friends, so it was a hard decision for Captain America to deal with, and, that his best friend was now this, Russian assassin that barely remembers him. And it was tragic in some way seeing that, done to him. But again, like I said, it's really brilliant in my opinion. However, again, Hydra comes into the mix and instantly I don't care, because like I said before, Hydra are not that interesting one bit, because they're just the Nazis. That's all I can say. Nazis, you already know what's with them, so it's a bit. So what can I say? But also I suppose it was a bit unfortunate for me, because since Winter Soldier is the first Captain America film I saw, it wasn't that shocking to me when Bucky Barnes was revealed to be the Winter Soldier. Because, like I said, since I've seen it, I kind of, didn't really know who he was, so when he revealed his identity, I was like, who is that? So, it wasn't that big of a shock to me, but I guess that's what happens when you see the second film when you should have been seeing the first film. So, it didn't really have that much of a big impact on me, so it's a bit unfortunate that happened. But overall, I would definitely say I would give it a 9 out of 10, because, it was one of the strongest, one of those strong Marvel movies. They had great characters, great plot, great, antagonists, everything. It was just unfortunate that Hydra was in the mix, so I already, and the Winter Soldier's identity, I really didn't know, so it was kind of a bit of a So it was a bit of a downfall for me. I wouldn't really say it's a negative thing about the movie. It's my personal fault for not seeing the first movie when really I should have seen the first movie to become more like a shocker to me. But I will say that the Winter Soldier is a really interesting kind of thing, because that's one of the reasons why I like the Red Hood, who is sort of like the Winter Soldier in the DC universe. Except he's not really brainwashed or anything, but it's that, kind of like, the once companion of this hero now turned into this, villain anti-hero kind of thing, so it makes it difficult for the hero to fight. So, yeah, just a 9 out of 10 for me.
Okay, so that wraps up Captain America Winter Soldier. So, on to the 10th installment of the MCU. So, in July 2014, well, August actually. Now, this is where Marvel really switch things up and introduce us to some new characters who are, let's say, not from around here. And oh yes, we're introduced to the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, Guardians of the Galaxy was, well, I I never heard of Guardians of the Galaxy until the film was coming out. So up to a point, I was like, "Hey, what? Who are they? The Guardians of the Galaxy?" So I went to see it with my mates during the holidays and during some holidays, and I just finished my GCSEs at this point, so I went down to SeaWorld one day in August. I went to watch it with them, and well, what can I say? I loved it, honestly. Honestly, it was fresh and it was different from the other films that had come before, especially the music used in the film. It was a mixture of recognizable music and unknown music from like the 60s and the 70s and even the 80s, and wow, the acting from Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Vin Diesel and Bradley Cooper was just, oh my god, fantastic. And well, so yeah, in Guardians of the Galaxy, Peter Quill, who's known as Star-Lord, he forms an uneasy alliance with a group of extraterrestrial misfits who are fleeing from the galaxy on stealing a powerful artifact known as the Orb, which again is an Infinity Stone. Which, now in the film, what's interesting is we once again meet Thanos, who makes a cameo appearance in the film, and this does. Yeah. And this does ultimately have quite, let's say, an important link towards Avengers: Infinity War, because you know he's coming, and you know that we're getting one step closer to seeing Thanos in action.
I'll be back in a second. I'm just gonna open a window because it is a bit hot in here.
Sure, yeah.
Carry on talking.
Sure. I mean, what struck me was the fact that it was so successful at the box office, grossing over $773.3 million at the box office worldwide, and the fact that the critics just literally raved about it, and like the Avengers, everyone went to see it. They wanted to see it, and I think what was good was the fact that Marvel were able to introduce some new characters to the franchise, and really, wow, I was just impressed with the film. Really, the acting and the music and the storyline, and of course Ronin was, I think a really good villain. Although he didn't have much of a backstory, which was a bit disappointing in my mind, he was still quite a good villain, because obviously he was working for Thanos, and are also introduced to Gamora and Nebula, who are the two adopted daughters of Thanos, who Gamora joins the Guardians eventually. I think it was kind of like a musical in some ways because of the music it featured, but really in my mind, just a brilliant move for Marvel to introduce new characters to the franchise, and I think definitely, yeah, just for me, 9 out of 10 from me. So yeah, that's what I think about Guardians of the Galaxy. And what were you, Tom? What were your thoughts on it?
Alright, so I didn't see Guardians of the Galaxy when it first came out. It was only last year that I saw Guardians of the Galaxy, because by this point, I suppose, I was sort of going off, Marvel movies, because it was hard for me to gain any kind of interest in seeing like a Marvel superhero movie, because I suppose it was kind of like the same kind of concept to me, villain, hero kind of thing. So I didn't see it originally, but so when I recently saw it, I was definitely impressed by it. I love the fact that Marvel somehow managed to get these characters that were not that quite well known, and somehow making a movie about them boosted their significance in the whole Marvel universe. So it definitely shows that Marvel can bring characters that are not well known by the public, and show how important they are to the whole Marvel universe. There's not much to say about it, I would say, because I love the soundtrack. The soundtrack was very, classic 80s kind of thing, so I love the fact that they did that. Star-Lord was a very funny character in my opinion, the way he did his cheesy moves and everything. So I loved that. However, when it comes to the team building, I thought it was a bit rushed, in my opinion. Because it was a very short time, and then, I think it was, near the beginning of the movie, when it comes to the prison scene, that just, we're together now. It's kind of just well, I don't know, to me, it felt a bit rushed, building the team. But, it's not that big, well, it's not that big of a deal, I suppose, because, what can you do? But I would have liked it if there was more time given to the team to be developed instead of just instant. Because that's what I liked about the Avengers so much, that it took time to build the Avengers, because each of the characters had their own differences. They had personal vendettas against each other. Steve Rogers was not really particularly fond of Iron Man because of his technology kind of thing. And Thor Mark Hamill, or just Bruce Banner was not particularly fond of anybody because he was afraid that they would just use him for his, power. So, when it comes to Guardians of the Galaxy, it was a bit rushed with the team making. It was kind of just boom, done. Not really any kind of personal vendettas against anyone. It was kind of just oh, you just want to do this, I just want to do that. Okay, let's just do this. So, it's not that big of a deal in my opinion. And again, the villain is not that interesting at all. It's kind of just oh, he's a Thanos henchman, what else is there? But I was definitely interested to see Thanos show his authority, to show a potential of how dangerous he can become. And also, fun fact that Nebula was Karen Gillan. I actually wasn't aware of that for a very long time until I was again recently notified after seeing the film. I was oh, that's pretty good. So, that's a huge plus in my opinion. So, I would give this film about a 8 out of 10. Great story, everything. Just, for me, it was rushed development and, not that great of a villain. And my pug is deciding to join us. Hello, Mimi.
Hello.
Do you want to come up?
Okay.
Say hello.
Hello, Mimsy.
Do you want to say hello to the microphone? I don't know if you can hear it, but it's a pug. Hello, puglet.
Okay, so that's Guardians of the Galaxy for you. So, moving on to the 11th installment of the MCU. Well, the penultimate film of Phase 2, which in May 2015, the Avengers reassembled for another outing in Avengers: Age of Ultron. Now, this film takes place 1 year after the events of Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and in between the events of that film, the Avengers have come out together in order to take down several Hydra bases located across the globe, in the hope of locating Loki's scepter and getting them back. So they get back, but however, Tony Stark and Bruce Banner mess with artificial intelligence and create a program called Ultron. Now, bearing in mind that Tony Stark's a genius, right? It was out of his and Bruce Banner's control, essentially, because it backfired and it created a big metal monster, really, who stole a scepter and took it and took the gem out of the scepter, which is another Infinity Stone, and that's the Mind Stone, which was integrated into the newest member of the Avengers, which was Vision. Now, Age of Ultron. Now, I love the first Avengers, as I said, so we knew right from the beginning that Age of Ultron would have a hard act to follow, didn't we, Tom?
Yeah.
Now, Age of Ultron, I thought it was a pretty good film, but it was nowhere near as good as the first one, in my opinion. I mean, the acting was good, and the chemistry between the team was spot on as always. But Ultron, whilst I love James Spader, and as much as I enjoyed his performance in Boston Legal, I was quite excited to see him as Ultron. But although he was not a bad villain, he was fairly weak in some areas. Would you might agree with me on that, Tom?
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't quite live up to like Loki or the Winter Soldier for that matter. And what was interesting was he was filmed in different countries this time. I suppose the first film, so it was filmed in England, Korea, Italy, New York.
They have more of a range of countries to film from.
So yeah, it gave the film a different texture, and ironically enough, they filmed part of it in the Astra Valley in Italy. And when I've been on my road trip to Italy before, I've driven past the building where and the town where they filmed some of the final battle for Sokovia. Now, what's interesting about this film is in the scene where Steve Rogers and Tony Stark have a brief feud, it kind of foreshadowed Civil War because as you may have seen in the first Avengers film, which we didn't mention this earlier, you can see like Stark and Rogers had a little grudge towards each other, like there was more to the dynamic between them than meets the eye.
Yeah.
And that became more clearer in the second film because their difference of opinion. So when they had that mini feud whilst they were trying to decide how to sort out Vision, it's like you knew that Civil War was coming. You knew that their big fight was going to happen eventually. And whilst it was great to see all the Avengers back together, and of course having Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver introduced, as well as the Vision, it was also great to see the Falcon and War Machine also featured as well.
Yeah.
And what made the ending good was the fact that it started to hint that the roster would be evolving. So obviously bringing in Scarlet Witch and Vision and War Machine and the Falcon as the new Avengers, I was like Captain Black Widow. I think that was a good move because Dave showed that while Stark, Thor, Hulk, and Hawkeye had moved on, it definitely showed that there were new, fresh faces ready to join the Avengers.
Yeah.
And essentially carry on what the original lot started. So overall, I would give Avengers Age of Ultron. I give it 8.5 out of 10, which is I think a fully fair rating. Would you agree?
I guess, yeah. When it comes to Age of Ultron, it was a bit of a it didn't really live up to the first film as many of these sequel films have.
No, even though it grossed just over $1.4 billion at the box office, which was a little less than Avengers Assembled.
It has all the parts that made the Avengers good. The team ups and the jokes and the hero feuds between the characters, and that's the really interesting part to me in Age of Ultron, that they explored more on the characters feuds towards each other. So it hinted towards Civil War. So that's a really good part I did like about it. However, also it was interesting to see new superpowered villains such as Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch, and they actually have a proper reason for hating the Avengers because they were affected by the power of the Avengers.
And then Ultron obviously
feuded their desires, and it was and I liked Quicksilver in the Age of Ultron and Scarlet Witch because they hated Tony Stark because of what they did, and hence the reason they wanted to be experimented on by Hydra with the Tesseract. Was it with the Tesseract they got their powers from?
No, the Scepter.
Yeah, that got their powers from the Scepter because they wanted to have a chance of hitting back.
But then when they found out like Ultron's true intentions,
they switched sides.
And they knew that the Avengers needed their help in order to take down Ultron.
Now, I know it seems like I want to get to the bad parts of what the Avengers Age of Ultron, but I will say this now: I could go on hours and hours and hours and hours and hours about, like, you know, what I liked about the Avengers Age of Ultron. But, you know, I want to, you know, move on with the list and keep on talking about other films we've seen. So, I would say the reason why it falls back is because it's villain Ultron. I wouldn't say he's a bad villain at all. I would say he's an alright villain. Because it was kind of stereotypical that, like, oh, we've created this AI system that thinks for its own self. It kind of already sets up what's going to happen. Because, and you could say that, like, oh, you know, whenever a movie does that, that must be bad. No, it doesn't. I, Robot, I'll give you an example. I, Robot is one of my favourite films ever. It's one of my favourite films. I constantly see it. I always take my time to watch it. The reason why I like it so much is because this AI system has to obey to the law of robotics. You know, don't harm a human, blah, blah, blah. But the reason why this AI system named Vicky wants to kill these humans is because she saw what they did, you know, and everything. And she was like, how could this happen and everything? And you could say that's the same with Voltron, but unfortunately, that's the biggest thing. They're two different genres. iRobot is about a thriller kind of suspicion kind of thing where you investigate. Okay, so who's responsible for this or whatever. With Age of Ultron, they had to cut it short, so it was kind of just like Age of Ultron, create this AI system. Oh, guess what? He's evil. Hoobity doobity da. And one of my biggest, you know, disagreement also, when it comes to, you know, confusing plots, is it just me or just the Black Widow and the Hulk, you know, romance was odd?
Yeah, I didn't get that at all, to be honest.
In the first film, it wasn't really hinted at or anything. It was just normal. So in the second film, it was hinted and it was kind of just like, what's the point? You know, why are they suddenly falling in love? You know, why are they doing this? You know, it doesn't really give a proper explanation. They could just say, oh, guess what? We're monsters because this and this. But I'm like, no, there's a big difference between being trained to kill someone whilst also being a big, green, raging monster that can easily snap you in two just because he just stopped his toe on the coffee table. So it was a bit unnecessary. The romance was completely unnecessary, in my opinion. If you took the romance out of the film, it wouldn't affect the film at all. So, and then, unfortunately, my biggest contributor of the film, the death of Quicksilver. It's sad to me. It's unfortunate because I liked Quicksilver in this film because if he survived, he would have had an interesting kind of concept. You know, in Civil War, you know, would he stick with his sister to, you know, with Team America, Captain America, or does he want to go with Team Iron Man? But most likely he would go with his sister, obviously. I like the effects they did for him having a super speedster and everything. It was just unfortunate that the actor didn't die. It was unfortunate that the character was killed because originally in the script he was going to live, but for some strange reason they just changed it to kill him off. So it was unfortunate that that had to happen, and it was kind of contradicting a few points because if Quicksilver can somehow, you know where the bullet is coming from and easily move out of the way, he surely must know where the bullets are coming from a machine gun, and he could just move around it to get Hawkeye and the kid out of there instead of putting himself in front of the fire. So it was just a bit stupid, but people would say, oh, the machine gun turret could fire faster than the thing. You're just like, if a fan has to say that and the movie's not saying that, that doesn't mean it's acceptable. That still looks like, to me, poor lazy writing of saying how to kill off a character. So I think Quicksilver didn't give as much justice to his death. His death was kind of unnecessary.
Exactly.
But I would say it's a bit of a mix because it is a bit necessary to show Scarlet Witch's, you know, power, because essentially in the comics she's the most powerful mutant. She can warp reality. So I don't know if they're going to do it for the MCU, but it was a bit sad that, you know, Quicksilver didn't really give him that much of a chance to, you know, carry on as a superhero. But in overall conclusion, I would give it an 8 out of 10 because, like I said, great everything, blah blah blah. Just, you know, villain, okay, unnecessary romance and the death of Quicksilver. So, so what's next on the list?
Okay, so moving on to the concluding film of Phase 2 and the 12th film of the MCU. And well, Marvel introduced yet the newest member of the Avengers, which was Ant-Man. Now, what can I say? Ant-Man, well, I wasn't too sure about the concept at first of superhero who can shrink to the size of an atom, but when I went to see it in Cornwall with my family and my cousin, oh my god, I really enjoyed it because I think personally Ant-Man was a brilliant film in my mind. I mean, it was like a comedy heist in my opinion. Whereas there was like I don't know, sci-fi, fantasy, conspiracy, thriller oriented films. I like how Peyton Reed, the director, came out, wrote Ant-Man as like a comedy heist. That's what I thought, and well. And it was good to see how Howard Stark and Peggy Carter made cameo appearances in the flashback scene to S.H.I.E.L.D. in 1989. And, well, so in Ant-Man, it takes place 6 months after the events of Age of Ultron, and Scott Lang, who's a petty criminal, has been released from prison and is trying to rebuild his life. But however, when he gets involved with Dr. Hank Pym and his daughter Hope, well, he acquires this mysterious suit known as the Ant-Man technology that can shrink in size. He becomes the vigilante known as Ant-Man and is mentored by Hank and Hope in order to take down Darren Cross, who is known as the Yellow Jacket. Now, what can I say about Ant-Man? What I liked was it was very different to the other MCU films that come before it, because it didn't sort of focus on like on all the fighting and that. It focused more on the humour and the kind of lightheartedness of Scott Lang.
Yeah,
he really showed that even though he was a criminal, there was a good side to him. The fact that he wanted to become a superhero eventually and protect his daughter, the person who he probably loved the most out of everyone he knew. And I will admit, the Yellow Jacket was a pretty good villain. Even though he had no backstory whatsoever, I thought Darren Cross was a really good villain, and the Yellow Jacket was just well portrayed in my mind. And it was just generally funny. I really laughed for the whole thing. Literally, the humour was just fantastic, and I just couldn't stop laughing throughout the whole thing. It was just so funny and just so entertaining and engaging for the audience. So for those reasons, I'd say Ant-Man was definitely one of the funniest and probably one of the stronger MCU films. And I think I'd give it a solid 9 out of 10 in my opinion, because, well, Ant-Man definitely has the potential to go on to be an Avenger in the future. So, Tom, what did you think of Ant-Man?
So I'm going to start this off with saying that I actually like this movie, and again, Marvel hits the classic, like, you know, even though Ant-Man was actually an Avenger in the first Avengers comic. So he was an actual Avenger before the films. It's interesting. Again, it's interesting to see, you know, Marvel bring up a character that was a part of the Avengers and is just not really well recognized, and bringing a silly concept as shrinking to the size of an ant and commanding an army of ants. It's kind of just like, well, how is that going to make a movie? again, Marvel show that, you know, they can make, you know, something out of it.
Exactly, yeah.
They can, you know, show that even a hero that is not well known, like Guardians of the Galaxy, to be something special. So it's the same with Ant-Man, with a ridiculous kind of power, but it again, they somehow make it into a, you know, a meaningful movie that ties in with the Marvel Universe. What's really interesting to me is that I don't know that much of Ant-Man, so when I first saw it, I was like, oh, okay. So when I actually read about Ant-Man, I was like, oh, that's really interesting the way they've done it, because funny enough, Ant-Man is a bit more darker in the comics, because Hank Pym is the Ant-Man in the comics, and later becomes Yellow Jacket. But in the comics, he also abused his wife, like actual domestic abuse, and actually tried to kill his friends when he actually lost it. So I can get it why, you know, they didn't want to do that.
And he also created Ultron in the comics.
Yeah, so he was a bit of a disastrous character. So luckily, they made him a really likable character in the movie.
They did.
So they switched him with a different kind of character called Scott Hamm, which I actually like. And again, they do justice to that. They managed to create a character that, you know, he doesn't come from, like, you know, a hero backstory, like, oh, he's the good kid or whatever. He's an actual criminal, but he has a soft side to him. And that's an interesting kind of character that I like. You know, he's a criminal, but he later becomes the hero. So with this movie, they've done justice with that. You know, they've kind of broke the mold a bit. But I know that other movies have done this, obviously. But in speaking in Marvel terms, they've broke the mold for this in the movie universe. You know, instead of showing a character that's come from, like, you know, they didn't do anything wrong in their life, blah blah blah. With Scott, he actually is a criminal. So then later becomes the hero. And again, the humor is done really well, and I do enjoy that. And I like the design of his outfit as well.
Me too.
Yeah. Very funny.
Sorry.
So, when it comes to the villain, again, it falls on the same kind of, you know, trope that Marvel can't do good villains. Well, I would say they can't do good villain backstories, because most of their audience is young children who see the movies and just like, oh, it's the best film ever, you know, blah blah blah. But if you're actually thinking from an actual critical point of view, it's not that great of a villain. Even though the suit is great and everything, it was kind of a rip-off of Iron Man's villain in the first film, Ironmonger, and, you know, Justin Hammer. You know, they just want the same technology that Hank Pym did, and then, yeah, they're just villains because they are villains. You know, what else can I say? It's not that interesting, so again, what can I say? So, for this reasons, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10, because, you know, it has all these great elements and everything. It's just a shame that it still struck. It became another victim of the typical, you know, Marvel can't do a good villain backstory kind of thing. So, the next film.
Okay. Okay, so moving into the you're right.
Yeah, it's just the Desmono. Oh,
Smells a bit.
Yep.
Okay, so moving into phase 3 now.
Okay, so now this is at the point where I have seen some of the movies from phase 3, but I haven't seen all of them. So don't expect me to, you know, sort of like know each movie, because at this point, you know, I'm either interested in seeing it or I'm not really interested by seeing it.
Okay, so in May 2016, Phase 3 of the MCU kicked off with the Captain America Civil War, Steve Rogers' third solo outing, and the final chapter of the trilogy. So in Civil War, it picks up 1 year after the events of Avengers: Age of Ultron, and Captain America and the new team of Avengers continue their efforts to safeguard humanity from all the deadly threats that they'll await them.
Mm-hmm.
And so So whilst on a mission in Lagos in Nigeria, when tracking down Frank Gurul, who's now Crossbones and was secretly the Hydra agent back in the Winter Soldier, he tries to kill himself, but whilst trying to deal with them, yet another international incident occurs. Therefore, the United Nations can't tolerate it anymore because. So, basically, when the Sokovia Accords are brought in, saying that the Avengers will operate under government control, Steve Rogers is against it, but Tony Stark is for it. So when the Avengers can't agree on what's best, they essentially become divided. So one half led by Steve Rogers and the other half led by Tony Stark. But there's more to the story than meets the eye. It's not what you think. The main reason why the Avengers become divided is because Helmut Zemo, who's essentially the main antagonist in the film, his family were killed during the Battle of Sokovia. So Zemo really wanted to get revenge on the Avengers by therefore tearing them apart. Therefore the reason why he wanted revenge on the Avengers, which is why I thought he was a pretty good villain, because he had a reason for wanting to tear the Avengers apart, because they unknowingly killed his family in Sokovia without knowing. So what I thought was good about this film is that it handled the theme of politics and government oversight very well, like you knew something bad was what was going to happen. But it was in this film where we were introduced to Black Panther, of course, a certain movie, and we were introduced to the new Spider-Man, as portrayed by Tom Holland. Now, this was the first film to feature Tom Holland as Spider-Man, following the departure of Andrew Garfield from the Amazing Spider-Man films, because following the failure of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 at the box office, all sequels and spin-offs were cancelled, and therefore Sony and Marvel Studios struck a deal to allow Spider-Man to appear in the MCU, and Tom Holland was cast to replace Garfield in the role of Peter Parker. Now I loved Tom Holland and Chadwick Boseman as Spider-Man and Black Panther in this film, because it was absolutely brilliant to bring in two new characters into the film, because whilst the Avengers were fighting each other, well, Black Panther didn't really pick a side, because he was like a third party.
Well, no, he did actually pick a side. He was more with
Stark.
Yeah.
But he was kind of like but he sort of leaned more towards Cap later on. Because I think he was kind of conned into thinking, that Tom Stark was right and Rogers was wrong.
Yeah.
But Peter Parker, obviously, he was lured in by Tony Stark into the conflict. But the good thing was, I liked how Tony Stark kind of like served as a mentor to Peter Parker, which I think was nice to see that relationship kind of develop during the film.
Yeah.
And we would obviously see more of it in Homecoming, but obviously more on that later. But what I loved about Civil War was the fact that it raised the stakes for the Avengers, and the story was brilliant, and Zemo was actually surprisingly quite a good villain, if that's fair enough.
Yeah, I would say so.
And it essentially set the stage for Infinity War. So once again, like Iron Man 3, this film essentially deconstructed Captain America, because saw the Avengers being torn apart, Bucky finally getting his senses back, and then of course Steve Rogers letting go of that shield at the end of the film, therefore letting go of the Captain America identity. That was him being deconstructed again. So he went from being a rah-rah company man during the first film to being essentially an insurgent by the end of the third film, and more or less a fugitive. Well, for Team Cap, really, they all became fugitives by the end of the film.
Yeah.
So really, I think it'll be interesting coming Infinity War to see what's happened to those characters since then. But overall, I think Civil War was definitely one of the strongest MCU films to date. Whilst it may not have quite have lived up to the Winter Soldier, it was definitely a strong film, and I'd definitely give it a solid 9.5 out of 10 from me. So, Tom, what are your thoughts on Civil War?
Alright, so I recently saw Batman vs Superman in the cinemas, and you can imagine I'm with the crowd. I was disappointed by it. So
was
when I saw another movie doing a superhero versus superhero kind of thing, done by Marvel, I hoped that they did a better job, and they did not disappoint me. This actually had a really good reason why Captain America and Iron Man should be fighting. And like you said, it's a great idea. It's a great, like, you know, kind of political kind of thing where it actually makes the audience question about it, because with this whole agreement that, you know, superheroes shouldn't come until we actually need them. With Captain America saying it'd be better if we just came here as soon as possible because then we save more lives, whilst Tony Stark says no because then otherwise we're putting more people in danger. And they actually show why Tony Stark thinks that, because he is reminded again of, you know, the creation of Quicksilver, and, you know, the Scarlet Witch was because of his bombs. And a woman came up to him during a conference saying, you know, this happened to my daughter and it was all your fault.
Her son actually.
Oh, her son, sorry. And again, that made him feel guilty through his actions, and that's the interesting thing about Tony Stark, is that he is constantly haunted by his actions of what he's doing. So hence the reason he supports this whole, like, you know, we should only come when we need to.
Whilst and if I may, Tim.
Yeah, go ahead.
While Light Spire whilst previous films, like for instance The Avengers, Thor: The Dark World, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and Avengers: Age of Ultron dealt with like world-ending experiences, I think this was the right time to, you know, tell a story of, you know, what's the public's reaction to this. You know, has it gone on for long enough? And really, like I said, questions the audience: is it really time for the Avengers, you know, come under government control? And should they really be a private organisation? You really kind of makes you question that, in my mind.
Yeah. So I was pleasant to see that, you know, reoccurring heroes coming back, like Ant-Man. Ant-Man made an appearance, so that was wonderful. Hawkeye, War Machine, and every like hero that we know, as well as making 2 new appearances, Spider-Man and Black Panther, which both did really good, in my opinion. But however, when it comes to Spider-Man, I'm a bit mixed about that, because the way I see it is because I grew up watching, you know, loads of Spider-Man things. I've watched the Spider-Man animated series, I've played the Spider-Man games, I've watched the films. So I always so I always see Aunt May as this old woman who's wise, hence the reason Peter cares for her. So to see a younger version of May is a bit off to me, because I don't really see Aunt May as that figure, and Tony constantly hitting on her. I don't really feel that comfortable with that.
No.
So it's a bit off for me. But with Tom Holland, I'm not quite sure. He does a good role. His acting's superb, obviously, but again, I just do not see Spider-Man as that young of an age. But, you know, what can I say?
He also became the 4th MCU film to gross over $1 billion at the box office.
Well, Civil War, Homecoming.
Civil War, obviously, yeah. Has it made just over $1.1 billion at the box office?
So back to the point. Again, and they've actually managed to do the iconic scene in the end where Captain America was pulling up his shield whilst Iron Man is firing his 2 lasers at the shield. So they do that iconic image, which is really great. And unlike Batman vs Superman, where like they do the typical stereotype of every like hero versus hero kind of thing, where where like, oh, what do you know? We actually have a common enemy, kind of thing. In this one, they actually stick to the what the title is, because they have another reason to fight again. Because in the end, it turns out that the Winter Soldier was actually responsible for, Iron Man's parents' death, which makes him, go to Steve and says, why do you side with the person who has killed my family, and you actually know this?
And Zemo, obviously
staged this whole thing, and even though Zemo has a reason to hate the Avengers, unfortunately, he's not given as much of the spotlight because we're too distracted by, like, the whole superhero versus superhero kind of ideal, so that's the unfortunate thing with Civil War, I would say, because we're too distracted by this. We're not given enough time to look at Zemo as a proper, character. But I do like it that like they've managed to create a reason to why they're fighting. So the first reason was because of the document. Then the second reason was because Iron Man was revealed the truth to him that that Steve is actually siding with the person who killed his family. So I actually like that. Now, unfortunately, my biggest control with the thing is that the title doesn't really make sense. Because I don't know why it's called Captain America Civil War, because technically it's not really about Captain America. It was about the whole Avengers, so technically it should be called Avengers Civil War. But according to the directors, they say, oh no, it focuses on Captain America. You're like, no, it doesn't. It just focuses on the others as well. It focuses on a fair share of Tony Stark and Captain America, so it doesn't really feel like a Captain America film. It just feels like an Avengers film. So it should be called Avengers 2.5 or just...
That's what I thought.
Yeah, so Avengers Civil War. Hence the reason in the comic book Civil War, it was called Civil War. It wasn't called Captain America Civil War because it also focused on loads of Marvel characters. But obviously, since this is the movies, you have to have a budget. So that's my only two, sort of contrives to the movie. Spider-Man portrayal, not quite sure, but still found it enjoyable. The Zeno thing, they do have a potential for Zemo, but unfortunately we were too distracted by the superhero versus superhero kind of thing. And the title shouldn't really be called that. But because of that, I would say that I would give this movie a 9.5 out of 10. Because, like I said, they do a way better job than Batman vs Superman. They stick to why Civil War is Civil War, and they actually bring up a good message to you after the movie that makes you, keep questioning the motivations of the characters and everything. So, on to the next movie.
So, moving on to the 14th installment of the MCU. So, in November 2016, we were introduced to yet another one of our new characters from the comics, and that was Doctor Strange.
Okay, so now unfortunately, I have not seen this movie.
So down to me then.
Because unfortunately, I can't give any opinions on this because I keep telling myself I need to see it, but when you grow up, you have loads of things to do, so you never really get the chance to see it and anything. So I'm just going to leave it to Elliot to give his opinions on the movie, and then we move on to the next. So, my apologies.
Okay. So, Doctor Strange, he's portrayed by, of course, the man behind Sherlock, Benedict Cumberbatch, one of the most brilliant British actors of our time. And of course, stars Rachel McAdams and Tilda Swinton, and so what can I say about Doctor Strange? Well. So in Doctor Strange, we're introduced to Stephen Strange, who is a neurosurgeon in Manhattan, and following a car accident, which potentially could have ended his career, he sets out on the mission to find the Ancient One to help heal himself, and then by doing so, he learns all these magical and new mystical arts, really, and that's when he becomes Doctor Strange, essentially. And, I will admit, like Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man, I think it was once again brilliant how Marvel were able to introduce a fairly unknown character into the franchise and bring him to the big screen, because well, he was absolutely fantastic. Well, Benedict Cumberbatch's performance was phenomenal as Doctor Strange, because I love watching him in Sherlock, and well, I think he was generally the right man for the part. And what I think it does well is it focuses on more of the fantasy kind of mystical side of the MCU, because like Wong said, whereas the Avengers protect Earth from physical threats, Doctor Strange and of course his allies protect from more mystical threats. And we do see another Infinity Stone in it, which is obviously the Time Stone seen in the Eye of Agamotto. And so that in mind, there is a little hint sort of teaser towards Avengers Infinity War in that, because obviously Stephen Strange will be in Infinity War, obviously because he has the Time Stone. But what I loved was the fact that it opens up new opportunities to the MCU. So it potentially opens up the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse in the future, whereas we can see alternate timelines and really, well, I think in the future, I think in Phase 4 we could potentially see like the multiverse really take shape and see alternate timelines and alternate Earths really. So, in my opinion, Doctor Strange just literally, the villain was really good. I think. I mean, well, even though he was Dumanu was quite weak, because we didn't really see him until, well, the very end. So I think he was fairly weak in that sense, because we didn't really see him until the end of the film. So it was just his henchmen just doing all the work for him. But overall, Doctor Strange was, I think, a brilliant film, and just really realised how focused on more the fantasy kind of mystical side of the MCU, as well as paving the way for the multiverse in the future, and of course giving a few more hints and teasers towards Infinity War. So I give Doctor Strange, I'd say 8 out of 10, which is, I think, a fair enough score. And of course it grossed over $677.7 million at the box office. So yeah, I thought it was a good film, and I very much hope a sequel gets made in the future. So, on to the next film. So, in 2017, we had 3 films last year. So on to the 15th installment of the MCU, which last April kickstarted with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Again, another movie I have not seen, because even though Guardians of the Galaxy was interesting for me, it wasn't really enough to make me go and see the second one, because I'm sorry, I'm just not that interested in Guardians of the Galaxy, unfortunately. So I didn't really have much motivation to see Volume 2. So you take it from here, Elliot.
Okay. So Volume 2. Firstly, I will note it grossed far more than the first film. It grossed $863.8 million at the box office. And in terms of the timeline, it takes place much earlier in the MCU's continuity, as it's set in October 2014, which is about two or three months after the events of the first film. So therefore, it bridges the gap between Captain America: The Winter Soldier and Avengers: Age of Ultron. So in the second film, the Guardians of the Galaxy are now well established as heroes across the galaxy, and they continue their efforts to protect those who are in danger, and the film really explores their like new roles as Guardians. Like, they've got more responsibilities on them than they had in the first film. And the villain was, of course, Ego, who was Peter Quill's father, who we learn that killed Peter's mother eventually. and it turns out he was the bad guy. Now, the things I liked about Volume 2 was, well, the music was once again flawless, as you had quite a few fantastic tunes in it, like, for instance, Fleetwood Mac's The Chain appeared in the soundtrack, and it was more diverse this time because you had a mixture of well-known and very unknown songs in the soundtrack, so that was really interesting to hear. And whilst there were no real links to any of the other Phase 3 films, and there was like, and there was no links to Avengers: Infinity War because, well, obviously Thanos wasn't in it, because at that point it was about the Guardians and what they were up to at that stage. And oh my god, Baby Groot was just, he was so cute. He was just literally one of the standout parts of the film, and just so funny. Oh my word. But what's really sad was the fact that Yondu sacrificed himself to save Peter. Now, I was really sad when he died, because he was truly a father figure towards Peter. And I thought the bit where he came floating down and said, "I'm Mary Poppins, y'all." I thought that was just hilarious and one of the best comedy jokes of the film. So, in my mind, whilst Volume 2 was really enjoyable and a good film, it wasn't quite as good as the first film, because it didn't feel as fresh or as or as original as it should have done. But nevertheless, it was a good film, and I personally rate it 8 out of 10 in my opinion, because, well, whilst Ego wasn't exactly because, well, Ego was actually a good villain, because he had a backstory, and we knew how he came to being who he was and what his motivation was, and we all knew it was a trap essentially. So yeah, Volume 2 definitely lived up to expectations, even if it wasn't quite as good as the first film. So anyway, that's Volume 2. So now moving on to the 16th installment of the MCU, and July 2017. Peter Parker returns to the scene in his first standalone Spider-Man film, in Spider-Man: Homecoming, which was the first Spider-Man film since the Amazing Spider-Man 2 in 2014, and the first full standalone film to feature Tom Holland as Peter Parker, and of course featured Tony Stark, and featured Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark in the film, in a kind of supporting role. Now, Homecoming picks up about 2 months after the events of Civil War.
Wait, hang on a sec. Isn't that, what about Thor Ragnarok? Didn't that come before Homecoming?
No, Ragnarok comes after Homecoming.
Oh, I thought it came. Oh, never mind.
No.
Also, before Ellie continues on, sorry, this is going to be the most
controversial.
Contradicted. No, like, yeah, you could call it contradicted opinions, because I have a completely different opinion of Spider-Man: Homecoming. But I'll let Elliot show his opinion towards the film, and I'll give my side of it. So carry on, Elliot.
Okay. So, in Homecoming, it picks up 2 months after the events of Civil War, and following Peter Parker's involvement with the Avengers during Civil War, he returns home to resume studies at Midtown High School, as well as continuing to fight crime as Spider-Man. Now, this was a very different Spider-Man film compared to the previous ones, because I grew up loving the Tobey Maguire trilogy, and of course the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man films. So yeah, so whilst Tom Holland had certain elements of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in him, I felt he brought a completely different take to the character than we previously seen, and And it was interesting. And it was interesting to explore the concept of Peter Parker being high school because in 1960s comics, Peter Parker was in high school whilst in Spider-Man. So I thought it was interesting to kind of bring a concept that hadn't been explored yet in a Spider-Man film into the storyline. And well, Michael Keaton, who formerly played Batman in the 1989 film by Tim Burton, of course played the Vulture, who, well, now the Vulture was originally going to be played by John Malkovich in Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire had it not been cancelled.
Yeah.
Now I thought Mark Keaton did a pretty good job on the Vulture because we saw basically who he was beforehand, because in the flashback scene to the first Avengers film, we saw that he was like a construction worker trying to clean up the mess from the Chitauri invasion, and we definitely and I think it definitely had a purpose in this film, which was simple, to try and take out Spider-Man. And oh my god, that scene when it was revealed that he was his love interest Liz's dad, that was awkward. I was like, oh Peter, you've outdone yourself big time, mate. And yeah, as for Tony Stark being in the film, whilst I was a bit worried at first he would have too much of a role and would dominate the film, in all fairness, he got his fair amount of screen time without underdoing it or overdoing it, and it was good to see the kind of mentor relationship between the two characters develop further than we saw in Civil War. And seeing the Iron Spider suit at the end of the film, where Peter Parker was officially going to be introduced as a new Avenger, was quite cool. Seeing the Iron Spider suit. Now, obviously, we will see it in action in Infinity War, and well, there were a few there were a couple more hints towards Infinity War, especially as Gwyneth Paltrow made her first appearance as Pepper Potts since Iron Man 3. And obviously forward to getting engaged, which obviously will be one of the focal points of Infinity War. It kind of sets in motion what's next for Tony Stark. And personally, I think whilst Homecoming, I enjoyed it. It was nowhere near as good as the Tobey Maguire films, in my opinion. And well, it was definitely, and I definitely praised the acting and the fact that it was a very different take to the previous films, and I personally look forward to seeing Spider-Man in the next two Avengers movies, and well, I look forward to the sequel to Homecoming next year and seeing what that will bring. Which I rate the film, I'd say a 8.5 out of 10. So yeah, that's my view on it. So I will hand you over to Tom, who will give his rather interesting opinion on it. So
okay,
so it's a warning: he may get loud on this.
Right. So if you're expecting me to say that I love this and this, throw it out the window. Just chuck it in the bin. Right. I'm gonna start off with saying the good things about it. I'm not gonna get too much into it because it's pretty simple. Acting, good. Up to par. Everything. Character development, up there, I guess. It's there, I suppose. And CGI. All three, good. Right, so...
Oh no.
I would say that this is the worst Marvel film I've seen. And it's tragic for me that I have to say that. Because I grew up loving again, you can hear from my previous statements that I love Spider-Man. I grew up with the superheroes, so I just... Yes, Mimi? Alright. Sorry. So, I have this, standard with Spider-Man. So, unfortunately, when I see people trying to change the formula, I want to see that how they do it, and how it can be handled. Because if it's not handled well, it just becomes a disaster, which was exactly this film. To me, it was a disaster. So me and a friend, we went to see it because we were curious about it, and we both came out thinking, what was that? That was the worst Spider-Man film we've ever seen. So I'm going to start off with the villain. It was a crap villain. It was an utterly crap villain. Now, granted, he did have a backstory, and he had a reason, but it was a very, very poor reason. He got fired from his job, so he just decides to rob banks. Now, you could say, oh, that's a bit of a fair reason. No, it's not. Because again, it takes a lesson from the how to do a boring villain kind of cliche, where it's like, oh, I got fired from my job. Oh, well, time to rob banks. It's like, it's stupid. It doesn't make me feel sympathy for the villain at all. Like, if his family was poor, or he was struggling with finance, I could give some sympathy. But he isn't. He's quite rich, in fact. He's living a decent life. So for the sole fact that he's fired, and then he goes to and then he just decides to rob things, in my opinion, it is a poor excuse. Now, when it comes, my biggest tripe with it is many things. Now, the story of the whole thing. It's alright, I guess. Yeah, I should probably also add that to the list of good things. The story was alright. I wouldn't consider it the best. It's not that bad. It's understandable in some ways and stuff. So, God. Okay, so the reason why I don't like Tom Holland's Spider-Man is because, one, I don't like the idea of him having an AI suit. Because the reason why I like Spider-Man is because he was a normal person, a teenager who actually crafted it himself. So I don't like the idea of Spider-Man having an AI system assisting him and everything, because it didn't feel like a Spider-Man movie at all. And my biggest utterly stupid freaking thing about the movie was they took away the spider sense. The one thing that made Spider-Man Spider-Man. If the previous films have brought that up and then all of a sudden, oh no, we're just going to get rid of that, you've kind of fucked yourself. Because I don't know why they did that. It's just basically to fill in that Iron Man mentor role. And if I had to be honest, I didn't want Iron Man to be in the film, because it was unnecessary to me. I just wanted Peter Parker, not Iron Man coming in and, doing stuff. And also, speaking of Iron Man, they lied in the trailer. Now, in the trailer, there is a scene where Spider-Man swings along with Iron Man following him. Guess what? You never see that in the movie. You never see that in the movie. So they purposely did that to trick us into seeing it, which is a goddamn poor excuse for Marvel to make. And the fact that, it constantly, it gave me good movies all this time, so why did it need the potential? Why did it decide to lie to me? I really do not know. Okay, now, my biggest and also another big contrive is, like I said in the Civil War thing, I don't like Aunt May. I really do not. The whole fact that she's the sexy aunt and everything, it doesn't fly through me, because, like I said, I see Aunt May as an old, wise person that sort of guides Peter into doing the right thing, because Peter is a teenager. So he doesn't know everything. He doesn't know what is right and what is wrong to do. Well, he understands it, generally, but in terms of properly, not quite. So Aunt May is sort of that encouraging device to say, you can do this, or blah 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 blah. So let's give an example, right? So look at Spider-Man 3. She talks about, how people, they can easily get corrupted with power and enjoyment. And she gives a reference to, Venom when he gets the Venom suit, she says, power is like a venom. It takes over you and it makes you change. And that's exactly what she said. And it ties in with, Peter Parker getting the black suit. It's changing him into some way. That's why I like Aunt May. To me, she's the mentor of Spider-Man. Not fully, but she is the mentor to me of Spider-Man. So to see her as this young Aunt May constantly being hit on, it doesn't make me feel comfortable at all. It just makes me feel not comfortable at all. And to see my favorite hero as well, Stark, hitting on Aunt May, it's not good for me at all. Not at all. And another thing they stupidly do is, now, in the previous 2 Spider-Man films and in the whole Spider-Man universe, Harry Osborn is Spider-Man's best friend. Guess what? She's not in the movie. Now, you can do this, but do not replace it with a character that I couldn't give an utter fuck about. Neil is Ned is the worst character in this goddamn movie. He really is. He is just freaking there for comedy relief. There's no interesting thing about him. There's nothing at all. He's just there for goddamn entertainment. Now, you could have just done this with Harry Osborn. The reason why Peter Parker is so lonely is because he finds it hard to make friends. So Harry Osborn, this key essential character, is Peter's best friend. So to go and kick him out and replace him with a stupid knockoff of a kid who has never been in the comics, or at least from what I've seen. I've never seen him in the comics. I've never seen him in the games. Never. And just replace him with that is just utterly inexcusable and utterly poor. And it's just utterly insulting to the whole Spider-Man universe. It is utterly insulting. Now, the love interest. I couldn't give a goddamn crap about her. She was not a good love interest. The reason why I preferred Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane in the Andrew Garfield and in the Tobey Maguire is because they had character. They had a reason why Peter loved them. Mary Jane always provided constant support to Peter. Even if he was at his down times, she constantly offered support to him. Oh, you have to excuse me. Gwen Stacy, the first love interest of the Spider-Man, universe and everything. Again, she offered constant support to Peter, and she had so many likable features to her that made me feel sad when she was killed off, because that death had an impactful thing to Peter. So this one love interest called Linda. Now, Liz. Now, Liz is in the comics, and Liz was in an animated TV show. So it's justifiable for her to be the new love interest. I can perfectly understand that. But she was poorly developed, utterly poorly developed. There's nothing interesting about her at all. Like, every time we see her, she doesn't have any interesting things for Peter to carry on. No words of wisdom or anything to encourage her on. She's just the typical high school love interest. That's it. So when it's revealed that her dad is the villain, I wasn't surprised or anything. I was kind of just like, okay, alright. I couldn't give a fuck, because I just hated her. She wasn't good at all. So when it came to the end where you're supposed to feel sorry for her, I didn't feel sorry for her one bit. I was kind of just like, good, get rid of her. I don't like her. And now I'm going to move on. Now, this is going to be the most controversial thing I'll say. I'm not saying that now you can take this any way you want, but what I'm about to say, I'm not going to be racist in any point. But what I'll say is what I think from my heart. I'm not saying it's bad. Well, it depends. It really depends. Okay, so in movies, sometimes movies think it's important to have diversity, which is understandable. because you want to show like a role model to children, especially with Marvel. Show a role model for children, and to make them inspired to continue to do something like that. So now, this can also be your greatest downfall as well. Now, during the time that this film came out, Marvel Comics have been having issues recently because they had a pandering problem. Pandering is when you put too much diversity in there that you lose an audience themselves. So, for example, they basically all the main characters that made that superhero, so Peter Parker, Thor, and everyone, they're killed off. But they're replaced with the most panderous kind of characters. There's Asian Hulk, Black Iron Man, Asian Hawkeye, female Thor. You get my point. So, unfortunately, Homecoming has that exact same problem. It has a clear pander. Ned is the fat Asian. The love interest is black. And the big bully, Flash Thompson, is Arabic. And that's all I can say. It's so stupid. I don't understand why, films are constantly worried by diversity. I can understand why. Because, unfortunately, the day that we live in now, we can't pretty much do anything. If we don't show any blacks, we're automatically presumed racist. If we just do... anyway, I'm getting on top of myself. What I really don't like is that the fact that Flash Thompson is Arabic... Now, you could say, oh, I'm just being racist or whatever. You can take it that way. I don't care. The reason why Flash Thompson was made scary is because he was big. He was strong. It was the reason why Peter feared him. He was the big bully. He didn't want to get beat up. So you could portray Flash as the big, tough guy as Arabic. You could do that, and I wouldn't have a problem. It was the fact that he was smaller than Peter and was not strong enough. He didn't look strong at all. So it kind of makes you think, why was Peter afraid of Flash Thompson if he was A, taller than him, and 2, looked stronger than him? I really don't know why. So, and then there's Tony Stark. Now, I don't mind if you need to show another hero in the film, as long as it's done right, like Thor Ragnarok, that apparently I hear about. People say that it's one of those movies where it's a good movie, and that the Hulk serves a good purpose. So, like I said, you need to make it necessary. Unfortunately for Tony Stark, it is not necessary. I felt like he didn't need to be there at all. Well, I can understand if he needed to be there in the beginning and in the end, but the times when he's in the middle, it just doesn't really feel like a Spider-Man movie to me. It feels a bit of a Spider-Man / Iron Man kind of movie, because it doesn't properly feel like a Spider-Man movie. I'm not, seeing Peter trying to, impress Stark. Well, I don't know how to say this, but I just wish that Tony Stark wasn't that involved in the movie. I wished he would only be in the beginning and the end. I don't want him anywhere else in the movie. And again, that the fact that they lied to us in the trailer is the biggest utter downfall of this movie. Okay, so in conclusion, I would rate this movie a very poorly 2 out of 10. And like I said, great acting, great acting, CGI still there, decent story, but there are just so many negative things about it that I can't really, go back to. So we're gonna move on to Thor Ragnarok, and I haven't seen this movie, so I'll let Elliot.
Okay.
And it was because of Spider-Man Homecoming that I didn't see Thor Ragnarok, because I was just afraid that they were going to make the same mistake. So, carry on.
Well, have to fall asleep through that.
Yeah.
I'm back. Yeah, so Okay, so moving on to the 17th installment of the MCU, and that is indeed Thor Ragnarok, the third and final installment in the Thor trilogy. Now, so in Thor Ragnarok, it picks up 2 years after the events of Avengers: Age of Ultron, and Thor's become a bit of a lone gunslinger who's on a quest to find out more information about the Infinity Stones. But however, when he returns home to Asgard, he finds himself teaming up with Loki once again, and well, basically he finds himself stranded on an alien planet called Sakaar, and then runs into his old friend and fellow Avenger, Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, and well, he has to get back to Asgard in time to stop his evil sister Hela from taking over Asgard, and go to the impending Ragnarok, which is of course mythology. Take from the mythology. Now, what can I say? I think Thor Ragnarok is easily the best Thor film out of all three of them. I think it was literally a massive improvement over Thor and Thor: The Dark World. I don't know why, but it was like a 1970s, 1980s kind of sci-fi comedy in my mind. Whereas because whereas it featured the Hulk, which partly adapted the Planet Hulk storyline from the comics, which I thought was really good, and the fact that Hela was actually quite a strong female villain, which I loved. The fact that Marvel had a female villain in it, which I feel they need to do more often. We knew she was Odin's other child who we didn't know about, but the interesting thing about Ragnarok was the fact that like I'm 3 and Captain America: Civil War, it deconstructed Thor, but 10 times more than Iron Man and Captain America. Reasons being is because the fact that Hela destroyed his hammer Mjolnir. He then had his hair cut short, and then he lost an eye, and Asgard got destroyed. It essentially stripped him down to a refugee, essentially. And yes, it does include quite a few hints and teasers towards Avengers: Infinity War, because by the end of Ragnarok, you're left wondering what's next for Thor. Just, now that he's lost his hammer, he's had his hair cut short, he's lost an eye, and Asgard's gone for good. It really makes you wonder what's going to happen for Thor next. So really, Thor Ragnarok was easily the best Thor film out of all three of them, because I loved its humour, its style, and the acting's good, and Hela is easily one of the best MCU villains by far. And well, if Chris Hemsworth decides to return as Thor for a fourth Thor movie, then I definitely think it should happen, because they've literally gone and reinvented Thor in so many ways, and I think there's more to do with his character than ever. So I'm gonna give Thor Ragnarok a solid 10 out of 10, because I just can't fault it whatsoever. It literally is one of the MCU's strongest films in my mind. So yeah, that's Thor Ragnarok for you. And now we're getting on to a major film here, which was the first MCU release of 2018, and that is of course the 18th installment of the MCU, Black Panther.
Okay, so I've actually seen this movie, so I can finally, get in it.
Alright, so after you, Tom.
Alright, so I will say this now, that Black Panther is really good. It is definitely worth a watch. It's because it's good to see a Marvel movie back to its original kind of ways of sticking to the superhero title like it should be. after the major disappointment of Spider-Man: Homecoming, I needed to feel like the magic of Marvel, and Black Panther did that. They showed it. It was good to see Black Panther as he is, without the help of any other superhero, just a solo, Black Panther movie, and I was really impressed by it. I really loved it, from the characters to the setting, and to the even though the story is very similar to the Disney's Lion King, I would still say it's worth a watch. Even though you might be listening to this not knowing about Black Panther, and I might just say that, and you've already seen the Lion King, I might have just kind of spoiled it for you. But I suppose it is a bit different to the Lion King in some way. But if I had to be honest, it's very similar to the Lion King, unfortunately. But it's not that bad, actually. It doesn't copy every single element. It still, shows a nice story for you to get invested with, and I would say that the biggest strength with Black Panther is that it finally gets the villain right. Warmonger is actually a very interesting villain, in my opinion, because he comes from the background of when blacks were not really accepted during that time, and because of the way Wakanda treats its people, his uncle was seen as a traitor. So when he was killed and abandoned by his people, Killmonger. Isn't that funny? Killmonger decided that, he had a reason to, become the next king, and to show that, Wakanda, should not be taken, lightly. We are a major force and everything. So it's very interesting to see that concept. And the CGI effects are beautiful, as well as the Black Panther suit. I actually like the whole artificial suit coming together and everything. So that's all I can say. It's so good. I would say its one drawback feature is its jokes. Some of the jokes feel a bit unnecessary, like the "what are those?" kind of thing. Do you remember them when that was going around? It was a bit stupid, so they make a reference to that joke, which is a bit stupid in my opinion. But despite that, everything else is bloody brilliant, and I highly recommend you watch it. So for Black Panther, I will give it a 9.5 out of 10, and I hope that, and I actually look forward to seeing his appearance in Infinity War.
Okay, so I think I pretty much agree with Tom on that. That's the same view as Tom. But what I also liked about Black Panther was the fact that it had a real kind of James Bond kind of vibe to it. Because essentially, it was like the James Bond of the Marvel Universe. Because T'Challa, he's so slick and stylish, and just like James Bond is, except he's like a black James Bond. Because he has all the gadgets and all the and like the MI6 style lab in Wakanda, where all the gadgets and suits are made.
I like the fact that they did like a Casino Royale kind of thing when he was in the casino. So there's another thing.
And the music, well, soundtrack as well as the songs in it, they were just incredible. They just literally made the film so relevant to the themes of it. And I liked how, well, when there was like conflict between T'Challa and Killmonger, it was like T'Challa was Barack Obama and Killmonger was like Donald Trump in some ways. So I liked how it made.
I wouldn't compare it to that. But
In my opinion, it kind of felt relevant in that way, like it's very similar to like Barack Obama and Trump, really. But that's my opinion. Anyway, no one has to agree with me necessarily. But yeah, I totally agree with Tom, and I think we need more Marvel films with a black cast in it. Really, I do. And it was great to see Martin Freeman back from the Civil War. He was a really good addition to the film. And yeah, I would give Black Panther, in my mind, a 10 out of 10 from me. and more importantly, it deserves to be the fifth MCU film to gross over $1 billion box office, as it's just made 1.3 billion at the box office. So yeah, really good and well, fantastic. So moving on. So now we looked at all the current films. It's time to look ahead in the final part to the future.
So at the current time of this podcast, Avengers: Infinity War might have already come out, or it hasn't. And I do plan on making on like a review for my channel discussing about Avengers: Infinity War, and my thoughts towards it. Now this is what the previous Marvel films have been doing. The previous 18 Marvel films have been doing. They've been building this this huge big event, which was the Avengers: Infinity War. Think of the Avengers as like a big project, and all these are side projects. So phase 1, blah 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 blah, the big project Avengers. Then phase 2, Avengers Age of Ultron. Then the third one, Avengers: Infinity War. Now, I hear loads of rumors about it, like who's going to die, what they're going to do, and everything. And I'm actually very curious to see it, and I will definitely make try to see it as soon as I can. Now, however, I will say this, that we should not hype it to that extent, because Batman vs Superman and Suicide Squad had the exact same thing. They were overhyped so much that when it actually came out, it turned out to be disappointing. So I fear that Marvel could maybe end up on that road, because there's been this big hype to this project that's been building up for so long.
For 10 years now.
Yeah, for 10 years, and they're actually going to finally show it to us. I fear that it might go horribly wrong, like it might do something really stupid. But so far, by seeing the trailers, it looks pretty good, and they're doing it in the right direction. Hopefully, when I actually see it, they do a really properly good job, and they bring all the parts that I like about Marvel, and they fix and especially with Black Panther, they've managed to improve on this villain problem. So maybe they might do the same thing for Thanos. However, I don't know that much about Thanos. I hear that apparently he's kind of just like this evil war general kind of thing. So unless they do something in the film that makes me interested in Thanos, then that would be a big definite plus in this movie.
I mean the question is really who will survive and who's going to die. That's the most important thing. I mean, I've got a feeling that Captain America might die because in the trailer, right? In the recent trailer, when he in the clip where he's holding off Thanos' Infinity Garland, I've got a feeling he might have the Soul Stone, because if you saw closely, his eyes like change colour. They change to orange. So it's kind of obvious that he has a Soul Stone, because how else is he able to hold off the Infinity Garland, the most powerful object in the universe? So it really makes you wonder that because Chris Evans has confirmed officially that Infinity War and Avengers 4, which is out next year, these two films will be his last as Captain America, and then he'll be stepping down, and then he'll be hanging up the shield after that. So really, Infinity War and Avengers 4 will be the end of the first three phases, and essentially the beginning of the next chapter. So really, how you see it is, Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3, they make up Chapter 1, whereas everything from Phase 4 onwards will be Chapter 2. So I've really enjoyed watching the MCU films. I think it's been a fantastic 10 years, for movie making, and I really can't wait to see Infinity War and Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel, of course, and Avengers 4. Yeah. So really, and then when it all ends next year, I'm just really looking forward to seeing to seeing what the future holds for Marvel beyond Avengers 4. So Tom, obviously because X-Men and Fantastic Four are officially coming back to the MCU for good, what do you hope to see in the MCU beyond Avengers 4 for Phase 4 and beyond?
Well, I can't really say that much because at this point I'm sort of in and out with Marvel because the trouble with an ongoing franchise is that you need to somehow keep your audience, connected. Why do I keep coming back to see them? So with Black Panther, they gave me a reason to come back, but because of Spider-Man: Homecoming, they gave me a reason to why I shouldn't come back at all. So Mimi, hush, shush, shush. Oh, you alright? Who are you? So, as I was saying, sorry. Because of those two, I keep coming in and out, so I can't really say that much about, my plans for, the future franchise or whatever. All I can really say is that I just hope they do a good job of what they do. And obviously there's, loads of projects that are coming up, like Captain Marvel, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Ant-Man and Wasp.
Which is out in July.
It's really astonishing to see, that this franchise, ever since it started in 2008, it's continued on and on and on and on and on and on.
And people love it.
Yeah, and people somehow...
and the fans are so dedicated to the franchise.
Yeah, exactly. So, I just hope they just do good in the future.
I mean, when the time for Fantastic Four does come to be rebooted in the MCU, I really hope Marvel do them justice. Really, I do. I mean, the question is, Tom, for you, who do you want to see play the new Fantastic Four in an MCU reboot in the future? Unfortunately,
I'm not one of those people who who make up those ideal casting, because I'm not really that big of a movie expert in terms of I think they should play this and this, because you can pretty much write the character however you want in the film. So take The Rock, he's going to be playing Black Adam, even though The Rock's not really Egyptian and Black Adam is Egyptian. You can write it in a way that make it look like this. So I can't really say much at all about I think they should play this, they should play that, blah blah blah. So
well, I'm in favour of someone like Matt Smith for Reed Richards.
Actually, yeah, I guess I would see him as Mr. Fantastic.
And I would say someone like Emilia Clarke for Sue Storm. Probably Zac Efron for Johnny Storm. I'm not too sure who'd make a good Ben Grimm, but for Doctor Doom, I think someone like Jason Statham would be ideal for the part. But I don't know, really. I mean, really, come next year when it comes to Avengers 4, it will truly be emotional because it is going to be the end of an era. It's going to be the end of what's been a fantastic by then 11 years. So essentially, essentially it'll be the end of chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 2.
Yeah, and it's it's just astonishing to see that ever since it began in 2008. You see the DC, their rivaling company, trying to do the same thing. They've announced so many plans for films, they've released Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, Suicide Squad, Wonder
Justice
Woman,
League.
Justice League,
and they've got films coming up like Aquaman, Shazam,
Cyborg,
Green Lantern Corps, Green Arrow, etc.
So you can see DC are trying to do the exact same thing, but except that they're a bit fumbling at the moment. But after seeing Justice League, they are stepping in the right direction. But we're not going to carry on talking about that.
No.
So in conclusion, I just hope that a Marvel Infinity War does good, and that they continue to continue just have a path of succession of the Marvel universe and just keep expanding it and adding new characters to the whole thing and whatever.
I reckon Infinity War is going to make history, because I reckon if it's really successful and gets loads of people seeing it, Now, this is a big if. I reckon Avengers Infinity War could potentially become the first ever film to gross $3 billion at the box office worldwide. I reckon it might just beat Avatar at the box office.
In fact, as the current making of this podcast, they're already selling pre-order tickets to see Infinity War, and I've never seen a movie do that before. So
selling
that is actually really surprising to me to see that a movie is offering pre-tickets for you to get.
Selling more than the previous 7 MCU movies combined.
Mm-hmm.
Now I of course have booked my tickets in advance because me and my mate Dom Ellis are going to watch it on the 27th of April, which is the day after it comes out in the UK. So I will be posting. So I will do a review on Parsons Media Studios about Infinity War.
Yeah. And
I will share my spoiler-free thoughts about it.
And it'll be the same with me. After I've seen the movie, I'll probably just explain every single part of the movie. So it will be a bit spoilerish, but that's what you get when you're reviewing a movie. So this concludes the Marvel podcast. I'd like to thank Parsons Media Studios for joining me this evening to discuss about the Marvel movies in general and our opinions from the very first thing to the very last thing.
And of course our hopes for the future of the MCU.
Mm-hmm. If you'd like to see more of me, my channel is Thomas Obaidy, and you can probably find it on the Spark Gaming website. If you'd like to see more of Elliot's kind of content and side, go to Parsons Media Studios. So, like I said, this concludes the podcast. I'd like to thank you for listening, and just have a great night or afternoon that you're listening to this. Bye bye.